All right, so ready to dive into like one of the wildest financial stories like ever, the GameStop saga.
Yeah.
But we're not just like rehashing the headlines,
Right.
We're going deep with Charles Gradante.
Yeah.
Wall Street veteran, been around since like the Drexel Burnham days, the 80s,
Wow.
to get his unique perspective on what really happened.
Yeah. Gradante, he's not your typical Wall Street guy.
Right.
He actually became like a voice for the little guy,
Yeah.
The retail investor during all that GameStop craziness. He saw them as kind of like the canaries in the coal mine, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Exposing those cracks in the system that, everybody else was kind of ignoring.
Totally. Okay, so rewind back to early 2021.
Yeah.
GameStop stock,
All right.
which was being heavily shorted by, hedge funds,
Right.
suddenly explodes, right? Thanks to a bunch of retail investors coordinating, like on Reddit,
Wild.
buying up shares, buying up options like crazy, squeezing those hedge funds who bet against GameStop. It's like classic David versus Goliath. It really was.
But this time, David started winning.
Yeah, and the Giants were happy about it.
Not at all. Oh. And that's where Gradante gets really interesting.
Right.
He argues that what those Reddit traders were doing was actually no different than what hedge funds do all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Find market inefficiencies and,
Exploit them.
exploit them, yeah. The only difference.
We weren't supposed to win.
Exactly.
Right. And that, he says, that exposed a system that's like rigged against,
Totally.
the average investor.
The average investor. Okay, so walk me through this.
Okay.
How does Gradante explain how this whole short squeeze thing, actually worked?
Okay, so imagine a giant seesaw, okay?
Okay.
On one side, you've got all these retail investors piling on,
Yeah.
buying up call options on GameStop.
Okay.
And to stay balanced, the market makers, like Citadel.
Right.
On the other side, they're forced to buy GameStop stock
Got it.
to hedge their own, exposure.
To hedge. And this buying frenzy, it pushes the price higher,
Right.
higher,
Okay.
creating that short squeeze.
Got it. So the more those Reddit traders bought,
Yeah.
the more the market makers had to buy, fueling the fire.
Exactly.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
It is, and it gets even crazier because Gradante suspects that some market makers may have been selling naked call options.
Naked call options, okay.
So that means they didn't actually have the shares to back them up if those calls were exercised.
Right.
It's like selling a car you don't even own,
Yeah.
but promising to deliver it later.
Wow.
Super risky.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, straight up illegal.
Wait, hold on. So they're basically selling something
They don't even have.
they don't even have. What happens if those calls get exercised?
That's where things get really messy.
Okay.
And this is where Gradante really starts to sound the alarm
Okay.
about synthetic shares. Okay.
So think of them like a shadow of the real stock.
Okay.
They're bets, but tied to GameStop's price.
Right.
But not actual ownership.
Okay.
The problem is too many shadows.
Yeah.
Make it really hard to see what's really going on.
Right.
Who owns what.
Right.
It gets all muddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you've got this crazy mix of call options,
Yeah.
synthetic shares, and potentially even naked short selling,
Right.
all happening at the same time.
Crazy.
No wonder GameStop's price went through the roof.
Yeah, and for Gradante, this whole saga, it wasn't just some random event.
Right.
It was a symptom of a much deeper problem.
Okay.
A system that's designed to benefit, the big guys at the expense of the little guy.
Right. So what's the big problem?
The big problem. Well, Gradante points to the T+2 settlement process.
T+2.
That 2-day lag
Yeah.
between when you buy a stock and when the trade actually settles.
Right.
He thinks this gap is like leaving the vault door open.
Uh-oh.
For 2 days after you make a deposit, naked short sellers can just waltz in
Oh, man.
and take what they want.
Wow. So he's saying that the 2-day delay
Yeah.
is actually like a loophole
It is.
that allows institutions to basically sell shares they don't even own,
That's right.
hoping to cover their tracks
Yep.
before anyone notices.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
And that's just one example of what Gradante sees as this rigged system, He's not just pointing fingers at a few bad apples.
Right.
He's talking about a fundamental imbalance of power
Right.
that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've established that the GameStop saga was more than just a bunch of, Redditors messing around.
For sure.
But what was Gradante's actual, role in all of this?
Yeah.
Did he try to, like, stop it?
Good question.
Or did he cheer on the retail investors?
So Gradante didn't directly intervene in the market, but he did use his platform,
Okay.
to speak out.
Okay.
He started giving interviews, writing articles, even testified before Congress,
Wow.
warning about the dangers of naked short selling
Right.
and calling for, reforms to the system.
Right.
He basically became this unlikely champion for retail investors.
That's cool.
Using his insider knowledge to shed light on, the shady practices of some of his former Wall Street peers.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. And he wasn't afraid to call out the big guys either,
Right.
the hedge funds who got caught in the short squeeze.
Right.
He accused them of being, reckless, taking on way too much risk, and basically just getting greedy.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just the hedge funds. He also had some harsh words for the market makers.
Oh, really?
Suggesting they might have been, pouring gasoline on the fire by selling all those naked call options to those eager, retail investors.
Yeah. Right. Right. So it sounds like, he wasn't afraid to ruffle some feathers on Wall Street.
No, he wasn't.
But what was the media's reaction to all of this?
Yeah.
Did they pick up on what Gradante was saying?
That's where things get a little frustrating, I think.
Okay.
Because Gradante felt like the mainstream media completely missed the point.
Yeah.
They were too busy focusing on the whole meme stock mania,
Right.
and portraying those retail investors as reckless gamblers or something. They didn't seem to grasp the deeper systemic issues he was trying to highlight.
So they were basically blaming the victims.
Yeah.
That's kind of messed up.
It is. Gradante saw it as a classic case of, the media protecting the establishment.
Yeah.
They were more interested in painting that narrative of irrational retail investors versus savvy Wall Street pros instead of acknowledging the very real flaws in the system that allowed all this to happen.
Right. Okay, so what about the regulators? Did they take any action based on Gradante's warnings?
Gradante wasn't exactly impressed with their response.
Okay.
He felt like they were very slow to react.
Yeah.
And too willing to just accept the status quo.
Right.
Sure, there were a few fines handed out here and there for practices like naked short selling.
Right.
But in Gradante's view, those were just slaps on the wrist, just the cost of doing business for these giant institutions.
So he's saying the punishment, didn't fit the crime.
That's right. And until there are real consequences for those who break the rules, Gradante believes we're just setting ourselves up for, I don't know, GameStop-like meltdown.
Right, right.
He's a big believer in technology as a solution, especially blockchain.
Blockchain, okay.
He thinks if we had, real-time settlement powered by blockchain, it would revolutionize the markets, make them way more transparent and much harder to manipulate.
So it's like a giant unhackable receipt book for every stock trade.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about the human element?
Right.
What can individual investors like you and me do to protect ourselves in this kind of environment?
Gradante has some advice for that too.
Okay.
He encourages investors to, do their own research.
Right.
Don't just blindly follow the hype.
Yeah.
He stresses the importance of understanding, how the market works.
Right.
Especially the mechanics of short selling and the potential risks involved.
So he's not saying we should all become day traders or financial experts.
No.
But we should at least have a basic understanding of the game we're playing.
Absolutely. And he's also a big advocate for, investor activism.
Okay.
He believes that individual investors, even small ones, have the power to hold corporations and regulators accountable.
Yeah.
He encourages people to speak up, contact their representatives, and demand a system that's, fair and more transparent.
That's pretty empowering. It's easy to feel kind of helpless in the face of these, giant institutions. Yeah. But Gradante seems to believe that collective action can actually make a difference.
He does, and I think that's what makes his story so interesting.
Yeah.
He's a Wall Street insider.
Right.
Who's become a voice for the outsider.
Right.
He's not afraid to challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
And push for real change.
So what happened to Charles Gradante after the GameStop saga blew over? Did he just go back to his hedge fund life?
Right.
Or did he continue on this path of, market reform?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Gradante, a guy who made his career on Wall Street, is now calling for its reform. Like, it makes you wonder if he sees any hope for the future or if it's just like too broken to fix, you know?
Yeah, that's a great question, because while he's clearly critical of the current state of things, he's not entirely pessimistic.
Okay.
He really believes that change is possible, but, it's going to require a collective effort.
Right. From investors, regulators, even those within the financial industry to really, make it happen.
So what's his, vision?
Yeah.
For a better system, what does a fixed Wall Street look like in his mind?
Well, for starters, he really believes that, technology has a huge role to play.
Okay.
He's a big proponent of blockchain, particularly for real-time settlement.
Right.
He thinks that would eliminate, a lot of the loopholes that allow for, naked short selling to happen in the first place.
Makes sense. More transparency.
Right.
Less opportunity for shady stuff to happen in the shadows.
Exactly.
But what about the, human side?
Yeah.
What about the greed and recklessness that seem to be just baked into the culture on Wall Street?
Gradante acknowledges that technology alone isn't enough.
Right.
He believes there needs to be a shift in the culture as well.
Okay.
A move away from that win at all costs mentality that's been so prevalent for so long.
Right.
And he thinks that starts with education.
Okay.
With investors demanding more from the companies they invest in.
Right.
And the institutions that oversee the markets.
So it's not just about changing the rules, but also
it's about changing the player.
Changing the players themselves. Yeah.
Exactly. Gradante believes that a more equitable and transparent system is possible.
Yeah.
But it's going to require, a collective effort from all stakeholders.
Right.
He's calling for a new era of accountability and responsibility.
Okay.
Where, everyone plays by the rules and the little guy has a fighting chance.
This whole conversation has been pretty eye-opening, I have to admit. I used to think the GameStop saga was just like a weird internet meme.
Yeah.
But hearing Gradante's perspective has really given me a whole new understanding of what actually went down.
Yeah.
And the implications for the future of the market.
Yeah. It's a story that goes way deeper than just the headlines. And I think Gradante's voice is so important in this conversation because he's coming from a place of experience and knowledge. He's not just, some outsider ranting about the system.
Right.
He's someone who knows how it works from the inside out.
Right.
And he's using that knowledge to try to make things better.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this episode?
I think the biggest takeaway is that even in a system as complex and as seemingly impenetrable as Wall Street, individuals can make a difference.
Yeah.
Whether it's through educating yourself about the market, demanding more transparency from, companies and regulators, or supporting those who are fighting for reform, we all have a role to play in shaping a more just and equitable financial system.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that thought.
Right.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Charles Gradante's take on the GameStop saga. It's a story that continues to unfold and one that we'll certainly be following closely.